Hi everybody, welcome to the How to Grow One Ton Pumpkin live event. Today we're going to be discussing my experience growing pumpkins. Maybe you can see behind me. There's a pumpkin here. I can make it a little closer. But this is just one of 8 pumpkins that we grew at my house over the summer, and yeah, this one I think is roughly 55 pounds, and we have one pumpkin that I think weighed in at 92 pounds, and that one's so big that basically I didn't really want to bring it upstairs. So hopefully this inspires you to maybe start growing a pumpkin patch at home. Or if not, maybe you just learn a little bit more about growing pumpkins in general. Okay, so this is a picture of my brother Peter with 7 of the 8 pumpkins. One of them was inside. And that one on the left, you can see it, the biggest one, that one is 92 pounds. So that's the biggest one. And that's kind of the vine. Once it's kind of ready to be picked, usually the vine starts dying off a little bit. And that's our backyard, kind of like the remains of the harvest. But this is the main kind of main harvest that we got from this summer. And then I'm going to talk a little bit today about the process, and then there's an open-ended question at the end of this segment. And after that, we're going to do a quick Kahoot about kind of what you learned today. And also, I forgot to introduce myself. Sorry about that. I'm James Fetter. I'm a senior at Palo Alto High School. And I think kind of this path applies to my own self-interest in that every year we grow pumpkins. And every year we take the seeds from the biggest pumpkin and use those to grow the next year's pumpkin. So kind of to ensure that we get the biggest kind of harvest possible. So just a little bit about me. Okay, I'm going to talk about the process now. So basically what you want to do when you're growing pumpkins is you want to start small. Usually you dig a hole about 1 inch deep and you kind of place the seed inside. And usually you want to do this in a small container like a coffee cup, or you can buy these, they make these preset cups as well. And those kind of allow you to keep a lot of control about the pumpkin's environment and make sure it's not getting eaten by a squirrel like this guy. And one thing that's important when your seed is small and it's just in the dirt is you want to allow it to germinate. And the germination is when the seed kind of grows into a small plant. It's that beginning stage of the growth of the plant. And to do that, you want to make sure you get lots of sun and water. So say at this stage, you want to water your plants once every other day, or once every day even. Make sure you don't overwater it just until the water is saturated. The soil is saturated with water. Careful not to drown the plant. And then the next step, basically, this is exactly how we do it in our house as well, is you take the pumpkin plant, once it's grown into kind of little sproutling like these guys, you transfer it to a little mound in like your backyard or wherever you're planning on growing them long term. And this is just so kind of the roots can expand and suck up more nutrients from the soil and that the plant has more room to breathe. Obviously, you wouldn't want to keep your pumpkin in a coffee cup or a similar container like that the entire time. So that's definitely important. And usually you can put 2 to 3 pumpkins per mound. It all kind of depends on how the plant is doing. Usually we do 2, and then if one starts to die, kind of one usually takes over and just grabs all that sunlight. So it kind of just works itself out. That's the beauty of Mother Nature. Okay, so the next step, once your plant is kind of thriving, you want to make sure you take good care of it to kind of grow the biggest pumpkin possible. So for watering, we usually water our plants once every couple of days, like once every 3 or 4 days. And the reason you do this is so when you water it, you want to allow the soil to become completely saturated with water. And this is one of the good things about making a mound, because when you have a mound, you're able to kind of trap the water in a contained space so that the water kind of seeps deep into the soil and helps your plant grow as big as possible. So honestly, when you water your pumpkin, you can leave the water running for 10 to 15, even 20 minutes at like a low setting. And then once the water kind of starts to overflow from the mound, meaning the soil is saturated, that's when you know it's time to turn it off. And you only need to do that once every couple of days. Definitely not every day, because then the soil will be oversaturated, but also like not once a month, for example. And then this is an important part. This is going to tie back into the open-ended question I have at the end of this presentation. But depending on if you want one big pumpkin or many kind of smaller pumpkins, you have to manage your vines. And the way a pumpkin works is that you have the main vine that grows off of the original plant, and you have these secondary vines that grow off of that main vine. And then, so right here, you have a picture of the secondary vine, and then the white arrows represent tertiary vines, which is kind of like the third like degree of vines, if that makes sense, meaning a vine that grows off the secondary vine. And the problem with these vines is that usually they take up a lot of energy to grow off, and they don't actually produce leaves that are very big, meaning they don't actually capture a lot of sunlight for the plant. And when you think about a pumpkin plant or any plant in general, you want to think about it as something that's trapping sunlight and converting that sunlight into energy that makes the pumpkin bigger. And so anything that the plant is doing, like growing a tertiary vine, is using up energy that is being taken away from the pumpkin that you're growing and into that action. So you see a lot of people at the professional level, they will take kind of supreme control over their plant and prune basically anything that isn't a big leaf that can trap sunlight or the pumpkin itself. So any of these tertiary vines, they will definitely prune away, meaning they just cut them off. And that is so that all the energy from the plant is going directly into that one pumpkin. I'm going to talk a little bit about this on the next slide. Yeah, so about pruning. So if your goal is to have one big pumpkin, you basically want to prune off any other pumpkin sprouts that are starting to grow. And the reason for that is so that if you have one big pumpkin and a smaller pumpkin is starting to grow, that smaller pumpkin is taking away energy that could potentially be going to that bigger pumpkin. So it's really important that you prune that off if you're going for, say, 1,000-pound pumpkin, like we saw in the original photo from my learning path. If you're going for a pumpkin that big, you definitely need to be pruning all of the smaller pumpkins. And even for the goal is to say maybe have like us, like our goal was not to have one big pumpkin. We had maybe 8 pumpkins of varying sizes. Obviously, one was bigger than the others. But even for that, you want to be pruning kind of the weaker. It's hard to explain this verbally, but once you see a pumpkin that's obviously not doing well, maybe it's kind of rotting a little bit, or it's a little misshapen, and it's still taking away energy, you can basically go ahead and prune those weaker pumpkins. And you kind of just recognize that from experience when a pumpkin that has no chance of succeeding in the long run. You want to prune that as quickly as possible to kind of redirect the energy that is going towards that pumpkin towards the pumpkins that you know will succeed. And a lot of this just takes experience. So as you grow your own pumpkin patch, maybe you can figure that out for yourself. And in terms of when to harvest, the pumpkin is ready to be harvested when you can almost always tell from the color. See this color, it's like a rich, deep orange color. And depending on the health of the pumpkin plant, that may affect when you want to harvest. For example, if your pumpkin plant is kind of dying and your color of the pumpkin hasn't quite reached that deep orange, you may want to consider harvesting your pumpkin a little earlier, just because otherwise, if the pumpkin plant dies, the pumpkin might die with it. So you may want to just cut your losses early if you see that your pumpkin plant isn't doing well. And one important step that we usually do is after we pick a pumpkin, usually the underside is quite white, meaning it hasn't been gotten much sun exposure because it's always been facing the dirt. And what you can do with that is once you've cut it off the plant, you can always just flip it over And what that does is that it allows the sun to change the color of the pumpkin, similar to how many fruits and vegetables ripen once they're off the vine. It's a similar process where you allow the pumpkin to become orange on all sides, and that's purely aesthetics. But definitely, if you want to have a good jack-o'-lantern, you don't want one side being all white and flat and misshapen. You want to make sure all sides are uniform. So, one thing. And then for this final question, this is kind of a question that could go either way depending on your personal preference. But if you wanted to grow a pumpkin, or if you could grow a pumpkin, would you rather have one big pumpkin or many other smaller pumpkins? And obviously, this ties back to the pruning, and the pruning of the pumpkin plant is very much affected by your goals with the plant. Reiterating, if you wanted one big pumpkin, you definitely want to be pruning all the other smaller pumpkins, and you kind of want to choose from the beginning maybe the strongest candidate to be that pumpkin, and you see the pumpkin growing a little bit, and then you prune all the other pumpkins that are growing, just to kind of redirect all the energy into that one pumpkin. Same thing with the vines. You want to cut off all the tertiary vines that are sucking away energy from that pumpkin. And on the flip side, on the other hand, if you wanted smaller pumpkins, then it's actually a very similar process. You still want to be pruning pumpkins that look like they're not doing well. You might just have 5 or 6 pumpkins that you choose to be the candidate, if that makes sense, for your like to go all the way in terms of being harvested. And it may not make sense what I'm saying right now if you've never actually picked pumpkins or kind of grown pumpkins in your backyard. But a lot of it is just visually, you can kind of tell if a pumpkin's not doing well, and if it has no chance of eventually turning into kind of a golden spherical fruit. And in that case, it's usually the best play to prune it right away. So if you want to answer this question and kind of give a brief explanation, we'll be featuring kind of the best responses at the end of this live stream. So feel free to drop those in chat. I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to submit your responses. And then after that, we can do a Kahoot. And I'll give you a little sight of my pumpkin as well. I think this one, yeah, again, I think it was like 60 pounds or something. So this is kind of like a medium-sized pumpkin example. Yeah, so as you're finishing up your questions, you can go ahead and change the Kahoot. I think you should see it on screen. The game pin is 2927045. So join that whenever you're ready. I see Ryan in chat says he loves my path. Thank you, Ryan. And he says he wants a smaller pumpkin because then he can make more smaller jack-o'-lanterns. So awesome. Okay, I'm seeing YT Brick Studios. I'm just going to read these questions now. We have time. Saying he wants smaller pumpkins because he has to wait longer to grow a very big one. Also, you can have more, but one pumpkin, it can go bad and you have to throw it away. Good point, yes. With many pumpkins, with one big pumpkin, you do run the risk that it fails. So I'm saying consensus right now for smaller pumpkins, which is what the path we went. And even, I do want to remind you guys, with the smaller pumpkin, doesn't mean very small. Like this pumpkin, I struggled to bring it upstairs, and this is 30 pounds lighter than the 92-pound pumpkin, which I'm a pretty strong guy. I'm a swimmer, and I can barely lift the biggest pumpkin by myself. So I do think many pumpkins is better as well. But Dirk de Mouses wants one big pumpkin so I can compete for the biggest pumpkin. And there is something remarkable about seeing these like 1,500-pound giant pumpkins that's just from a plant. And it's really amazing when you kind of see the end product and you have just a tiny little seed that's turned into this massive 1,500-pound pumpkin. So I do agree that with a lot of dedication and hard work, growing one big pumpkin can be super rewarding as well. say VM saying he would want smaller pumpkins because he probably wouldn't eat the big one. Okay, so VM's trying to make pumpkin pie or something. Yeah, definitely. I think there's actually research done that smaller pumpkins just much better for cooking in general. Definitely, if you want to cook with them, smaller is better. Dirk the Mouse says one big pumpkin. Oh, I think I read that one again already. Sorry about that. Okay, I think we're ready to start the Kahoot. Yeah. See what you guys learned from today. Okay, so how many pumpkins did I harvest? 7, 8, 9, or 10? Okay, seeing some answers come in. All right, so it was 8. And the picture actually had 7, but I said 8. So if you were paying attention, you should have guessed 8. Okay. It's like Ray in the lead right now by 1 point over Devin. On the second question. Okay, so I think I mentioned this many times. Hopefully you guys all get it. A couple answers coming in. 30 pounds, 59 pounds, 92 pounds, or 1,034 pounds. I wish. Okay, 92 pounds. Good. 3 got it. Wow, you guys really thought I grew a 1,000-pound pumpkin. That's impressive. Yeah, I wish. Okay, Ray still in the lead with 1,910 points. VM moving up to second place. Dirk the Mouse is in third. On question 3. Okay, talk about the process now. What is the first step? Do you let the seed germinate 1 inch below the soil? Do you dig a 6-foot deep hole and add 30 pumpkin seeds? Do you add the pumpkin seeds to a cup of water and let it sit? Or do you lay the pumpkin seeds on the surface of the soil? This is in the process side. I think this is slide 3 of my presentation. 6 answers so far. Right, and it was 4 of you got it. It's the majority, and it was you want to let the seed germinate, meaning kind of grow into a small plant about 1 inch below the soil. That is the correct answer. We got Ray still with that answer streak. Overwhelming lead, 2,762 points. Devin in second place, and Schwapler, sorry if I'm mispronouncing these, in third place. All right. Question 4. How should you transfer the pumpkin seeds to the soil? So this is when we have that, I don't want to give away the answer, but you can either put the pumpkin spot in a deep hole, unearth a trench and lay each pumpkin side by side, or push up dirt to form a mound and put 2 to 3 plants in each mound, or keep the pumpkins in the cup forever. Good. Yeah. So looks like a lot of you got this one. So this is again with the mound. A good reason for the mound is it kind of keeps the pumpkins away from the dirt, just keeps them high up to get a lot of sunlight. And also it makes it really easy to water the pumpkins because the water kind of stays in a concentrated area. So it makes sure it seeps deep into the soil for the pumpkins. So yeah, definitely want to make a mound when you're growing pumpkins in the dirt. Looks like Ray's still in first place. Schwapper in second place, and Devin a close third. Okay, how frequently should you water your plant? And this is either once every hour, once a day, once every couple of days, or once a month. To clarify, this is once it's in the mound. I guess I should make that clear. Good, yeah. And this is once every couple of days. And I think I talked about this. For the mound, you don't want to water it every day, and that's because if you do that, you run the risk of oversaturating the soil. So it's better just to kind of let the water run for 10 to 15 minutes on once every 3 to 4 days. And with that, you basically make sure that you don't oversaturate the soil. So looks like Ray's still in first place. An answer streak of 5. Schwapper in second place, and VM moving to third. Okay, which vines? This is all about pruning now. There should be pruning primary vines, secondary vines, tertiary vines, or none of the above. Got 5 answers so far. This is all about pruning. And for pruning vines, yeah, tertiary vines, good. So secondary vines are usually still good because despite growing off the primary vine, they still usually have pretty big leaves that can capture a lot of sunlight. The problem with tertiary vines, again, is that usually they kind of take more energy than they provide to the plant. So kind of from a cost benefit analysis, if you guys know what that means, they're not really worth it because they're taking more energy than they're giving back. So you usually want to prune those off. But yeah. Okay, looks like Trey's still in first place. 100% accuracy. Chopper in second place. Oh, sorry about that. All good. Okay, if you want a big pumpkin, how should you be pruning? So this is again about pruning the individual pumpkins now. And this connects back to that kind of open-ended question that I asked about whether you want to have one big pumpkin or many smaller pumpkins. The next question is also about this as well. Good, yeah. Okay, so we got 3 people identifying the right answer. And if you want one big pumpkin, you want to choose one candidate, meaning kind of whatever the pumpkin's strongest in the beginning, and you kind of direct all the plant's energy into that one pumpkin so it grows as big as possible. And you want to prune off, meaning cut off all the other pumpkins. So that was the correct answer. And we have, looks like Chulapa in moving up into first place over Ray, and VM in third. So we got a little upset going there. Okay. 2 questions left. If you want similar sized pumpkins, how should you be pruning? This is the same answer choices here, but now we have a different question. So if you were paying attention to the part about wanting a bigger pumpkin or many smaller pumpkins, this is basically how you want to be pruning those accordingly. So good, yeah. So if your goal is to grow many kind of similarly sized pumpkins, meaning smaller pumpkins than one big pumpkin, you basically want to let them all grow and then just prune kind of the very weak ones that aren't really have no chance of being successful. All right, let's see the standings. Chilapa in first place. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Ray in second place and VM in third. All right, final question. Let's see if Ray can come back and win. When should you harvest the pumpkin? This should be a freebie. Or maybe not, I don't know. It's like people are stumped a little bit. Okay, here we go. Answers coming in. So the answer choices are, should you harvest it when it's still green, when it's a faint orange color, when it is a deep orange color, or should you let it fall off the vine naturally? Good. Yeah. And the answer is correct. When it has a deep orange color, that's when you want to harvest the pumpkin. That one's pretty self-explanatory. And let's see. Pumpkin Kahoot Podium in third place with 6,391 points. We have Ray. Good work. Second place with 6,471 points. We have DM. In the first place, Chawapa, 7,429 points. Good work. And fifth place, Devin. Fourth place, Derek, I think, if I read that correctly. Awesome. Yeah, so hope you guys enjoyed that and learned something new. If you have any additional questions before we end the live stream, feel free to drop those in the chat. Yeah, any questions about kind of my experience growing pumpkins or kind of whatever you think. If you have any questions about if you want to start growing, feel free to ask those as well. Okay, I'm seeing some questions going in. Oh, yes. Sally asked, was I on the Netflix movie Social Dilemma? I was on that Netflix movie. Yeah, that's funny. I've gotten actually a lot of my friends have been like, James, I saw you on the Netflix movie. Um, yeah, and I was on that because my mom is a psychiatrist. So she was kind of like a medical expert about the addictive nature of social media. And they're like, oh, should we interview your kids? And they're like, sure. So then they came to our house. I think the interview took place after swim practice. And me and my sister got interviewed kind of about a social media usage. So I am in that. Okay, VM is asking, how to become so interested in growing pumpkins? Basically, a couple years back, we had grass actually instead of dirt in our front and backyards. But because of the drought in California, it was kind of a lot more efficient to kind of turn that into a garden. So we imported a lot of dirt and put that all in the garden. And we grow also tomatoes in our backyard. It's kind of just like a fun way to uh, kind of grow a plant. And the nice thing with pumpkins is that you really get like a tangible result. Like as you can see this massive pumpkin that you can just see from a tiny seed. The pumpkin comes back and it's just this massive thing. You can display them on your front porch. So that's really gratifying. Let's see. Another question. Dirk the Mouse, are you in high school or college? I am a senior at Palo Alto High School. So I'm 17 years old. I'm a senior. Yeah. Not quite in college yet. Okay. YT Book Studios, how long does it take the entire process from start to finish? That's a good question. So I'd say it varies from year to year depending on kind of how hot it is. We usually start in around May or June to grow the pumpkins. And this year, I think it probably ready to harvest in early August. But it really just depends on kind of the temperatures. And obviously, with global warming and climate change, that can vary now. But basically, whenever it's hot enough and sunny enough, it's kind of just like a by feel. Usually, you can start growing pumpkins, and they tend to do best in the hot summer sun. Libby asked, "Do you like pumpkin pie?" I love pumpkin pie. I've never actually made pumpkin pie with real pumpkins, but we usually go to Costco. My dad has a Costco membership, and they have these massive pumpkin pies for like $5 each, and I can eat so many of those without like wanting to stop at all, which is usually a bad thing because then I feel like I eat way too many. But I do love pumpkin pie. It's probably one of my favorite pies, along with apple pie. Okay, one last question before we log off here. Okay, I think I answered that one already. Um, just looking through here. Um, Sorry about that. Okay. Oh, sorry. Looks like we're finished. Hope you guys all enjoyed growing pumpkins. And if you have any other questions, um, definitely you can reach out. Um, and if you want to learn more about kind of an in-depth look, you can always check out my path on the on-demand portion of Track. Kind of has a more thorough. We only have 30 minutes here, so I couldn't go too deep into the process, but there's a more thorough look with that. And we have the next live event tomorrow at 4 p.m. as well. I think Ernesto is hosting kind of how to be creative if you're not so naturally creative. So if you're interested in that, definitely feel free to tune in. And otherwise, I think we're good to go. Thanks for coming, everybody.